I'm going to make an assumption here that in your recent past, you have had somebody approach you or come up to you and tell you about an unpleasant experience that they had. And it almost felt to you like you went through that exact same unpleasant experience. If I'm wrong, feel free to exit stage left. If I'm right, stay tuned for more information and solutions on what is known as emotional dumping. Emotional dumping is either a heightened reactive response to a triggering event and or a coping mechanism for ongoing stress or possibly post-traumatic stress. If it's a triggering event, the person will likely focus very much on the details when they tell you about this triggering, unpleasant, unfair event that happened to them. So they're going to be telling you detail after detail, and they did this, and this person said this, and my mum did that, and my father did. And they're going to go into and focus in on those details and not really reveal a lot about how they're feeling emotionally. If it's related to emotional stress or PTSD, then the person is going to tell you about the same problem or the same theme in a cyclical manner. So you might have heard about something last week that rings very true to what they're telling you this week. A couple of months ago they said something about this particular topic, yet they're coming at it from another angle with something else that somebody did to them. Same theme, same sort of problem. Essentially, emotional dumping is a toxic form of venting. Venting is healthy, venting is natural, venting is very necessary. But when somebody continues to talk and really focus in on the details, not share their emotional state, not look for solutions, not look for answers, but just really, in a way, I know it's an awful word, but just dump their stuff onto you, that's when you can recognize that this is not healthy venting and it is emotional dumping. So once they've dumped all of their stuff onto you, they're going to eagerly anticipate your reaction. And your reaction is going to do one of two things. So the first way is that you could validate what they've said and be like, oh, that's awful. That person was awful to you. That was terrible. Your mum is a terrible, terrible person. I agree with you. Or you might be feeling a particular way and they will look at the way that you're feeling, think, oh, maybe that's the way that I should be feeling. So they're seeking either validation or looking for how to feel about the situation from you. The person that is emotionally dumping is generally unable to see another person's perspective or consider any feedback or solutions. So when they emotionally dump on you, it's not really solution focused and they're often not looking for any feedback. It's really just a one-way street from the emotional dumper straight to you. And even if you do provide a really reasonable solution, it'll likely get ignored or even ridiculed. Therefore, emotional dumping is an act of stealing time and energy from the listener. So we need to be, as listeners, we need to be aware of this. Now, in regards to the listener, so if you happen to be in a situation or have been recently where you've gone through something like this, there's usually very little regard for your emotional state. Are you ready to receive 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 minutes of toxic venting? Because we're all going through our own things, and when people sort of come up to us and start talking to us about their issues and they do it in this toxic form, can actually be really draining. And finally, just on the listener, it very rarely involves the listener's consent. So a lot of the time the person will approach you and start talking to you about all of these problems, and you didn't really give your consent. You didn't say, okay, I'm ready to listen to what you have to say, or I'm in a good emotional state. So you're probably thinking, why would somebody emotionally dump? Well, it can feel very liberating for the person doing the dumping, and this could be related to childhood attachment patterns, which I'll go into a little bit of detail about now. These attachment patterns were the strategies this person learned when they were an infant to feel safe and secure in relation to their parents or carers or whoever was bringing them up at the time. So let's regress back to when we were a young child and we were in the playground, minding our own business, doing our thing, and somebody accidentally came past and knocked us over as they were running. And we've fallen down on the ground and it hurt. And we might have a bit of dirt on us and might have bruised ourselves, might have a little cut. And we've gone to our parent or carer and said, hey, like, you know, I'm crying here, like this is unfair, this is awful, what's happened to me? And hopefully, not in all cases, but hopefully the parent has done the right thing and validated those feelings and said, yeah, that is awful, and let me, you know, dust you off there and let's just address that little cut that you've got and let's make it all better. Another example would be that you had a favourite toy. For whatever reason, another child came along and broke that toy or stood on it. And again, you've gone to your parent or carer, so to an external source, because that's all you knew back then. And you've said, hey, like, I'm upset, this is awful, like my favourite toy. And they've said, yep, that is awful, and let's see about fixing that or getting you a new one or doing something to make you feel better. Now fast forward back to today, where we're in adulthood and we now have the capacity to self-regulate. If something awful happens to us, we can self-regulate. We can recognize our emotions and we don't necessarily need that external party to validate how we feel. Unfortunately though, for somebody that tends to emotionally dump, this ability to self-regulate is either missing, or for whatever reason, due to trauma or something awful that's happened to them, they've regressed back to seeking that validation just like they did when they were a small child. But usually, as adults, our parents aren't there to be at our beck and call. So these people end up emotionally dumping on those that are external to them. Possibly it could be a work colleague, it could be their friends, it could be their extended family, and it could even be their partner. So they seek these people in place of that original attachment to their parents. Right, now let's get into some solutions. If you believe that you have somebody in your life that is emotionally dumping on you, or you just like to avoid this happening to you in the future, the first suggestion here is when the person starts, so hopefully within the first couple of minutes, if you can gently redirect them away from the details and ask them how they're feeling. So perhaps they've gone into a couple of details, and if you can gently interject there and ask them, how does that make you feel? And if they are quick to reject that or quick to say, oh, it makes me feel this, but you know, they did this, then you know that you're going to be fighting an uphill battle there. So what you could consider doing is putting a time limit in. Listen, I do want to help. I recognise that you've got something to talk about. I've got 10 minutes. Does that work for you now, or would you like to schedule it at another time? Another solution is to clearly state to the person that you would prefer that they have your consent before they start to process what they've gone through, or if it's to do with stress and PTSD, that you set aside a particular time of the day or week where you can talk about these things. And that's to protect your emotional state and ensure that you're able to sit down effectively with this person and be able to listen to what they have to say and help them process it. And the final solution, if you're not wanting to do this at all, because to be fair, you're going through your own things, you've got low emotional energy, and the last thing you need is for somebody to come and tell you about everything that's going wrong for them. You could just simply say, listen, I recognize that this has happened to you. I can see that you're looking for support and I wish I could be there for you. But in this instance, I just don't have the capacity at the moment, but possibly you could seek a therapist, or we could talk about this at another time when I do have the capacity to sit down with you and help you process it. If you think you might be emotionally dumping, and I've been guilty of this and I'm conscious of it these days, one way to tell, and it's hard to do because you might be quite frustrated in the moment, but if you can recognize that you're just talking about detail after detail after detail after detail, then are you recognizing how you feel? Are you stopping after the first detail and really sitting with the emotion that's coming up for you? It is very soothing, isn't it? Slight interruption from some locals there, but we're all good. So for example, let's say that you've got a really close friend that you had planned to go to a social event with, but as time went on, you didn't hear much from them, and then they actually went with a whole range of other friends, and that left you feeling quite betrayed and angry. And you went to somebody external to say, oh, this person did this and they didn't do this and I've done this for them. If you recognise and can see that talking about those details isn't really going to help any situation, sure, having a healthy vent about it, but if we're going to be going into those details and not recognising how that made us feel and whether we might need to choose new friends or confront them about that, then emotional dumping is going to take place, and that's not going to be good for you or the person that is being emotionally dumped on. Another example could be that you're in a relationship and your partner has made these cruel and untrue accusations about you, and that's left you feeling angry and frustrated. Instead of going to a friend and telling them about all of these accusations and this person didn't, oh my God, like how could they say that and I've done so much. I know it's easy to do that, but instead looking at how those details actually made you feel instead of going into how unfair they were, because they were unfair and it is awful, but going into those details is only going to drain the other person. It's only going to give you some temporary relief, but going into how you're feeling and going, okay, they made this accusation about me, how does that make me feel? This is an awful feeling, I don't want to feel this again. How can I go about not feeling this way or getting myself into that situation again? And if it's something that you did, then taking responsibility obviously, but if it's something that you didn't do, then obviously looking and being very careful at the company that you keep. I hope that today's video has been of help. If you got something out of it, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't get anything out of it, give it a thumbs down. In the meantime, I ask that you keep well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.